But that dissertation you just gave was completely off the top of your head, which is
it was
fascinating,
yeah,
but odd at the same time.
You know, it would have been much nicer if you would have just said, it's fascinating, and not left it trailing and with a lot of tone there, because then it takes away a lot of the compliment.
I stand by the way I said it.
Oh, no, I know you did. It's just hurtful. And I think we've talked about this. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode. I think episode 8?
Sate, yes.
Yeah, episode 8 of Beyond the Exchange with Jeremy Smith, Chief Operating Officer of LODAS Markets, and Brian King, the all-knowing, all-seeing CEO of LODAS Markets. Do we have to bow to you now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Then I did that. Did I do it right? Or do I maintain eye contact more like Japanese?
Should be eye contact.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, good. So for anyone who goes, wait, both those guys look familiar, but I don't understand their surroundings. I'm completely disoriented because this is not where they usually are. You're right. It's not. We have moved into our new $150 million studio that was built for us by Sirius XM Radio. Shout out to the Sirius XM guys and Joe Rogan.
Sponsors.
Yeah. And but we are in a new location, not the company, but the podcast, because our podcast guru, Nathan, got his own studio. And so we are airing from the first time from his studio. Although I don't know if we're airing, because that's more like radio where it goes over the air. This is like we're wiring or podding. I don't know. We'll have to work on that. We'll get back to you guys on.
I think they call it interneting.
That's what they call it.
Interneting.
We're interneting. Yes, we're interneting from Nathan's new studio. Super. So unless you have anything that you wanted to address, boss, I am going to hit the random topic generator.
I think we should go right into the random topic generator.
All
That's
right.
what we need to do.
Is everyone ready? I am. Space travel. Yeah. All right. So here's something I find fascinating about space travel, but more specifically about traveling to Mars. So here's the thing. The biggest problem with traveling to Mars is dying of radiation poisoning. It's because it's a long journey and there's no atmosphere or anything like that. And you just get crushed. Brian, will you forgive me for one moment? For our audience out there, I'm a bit distracted by someone off camera. It's Brian's daughter, who apparently thinks she has clearance because she's the CEO's daughter, to just do whatever she wants during our podcast. And she is motioning. She is gesticulating frantically to Nathan. And so, Sid, they might not be able to hear you. Sid is short for Sydney, for those wondering. Was there something that was wrong that you wanted to address with Nathan?
Just a slight problem. You said that you would radiation is a problem. I'm like, just a
gotcha.
Just a small problem.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, she's right. Sid's sarcasm is right, because that's a big problem, radiation poisoning. Most, if not everyone, dies from radiation poisoning if you get it. And so here's one of the things they tried. Obviously not traveling to Mars, because we haven't done that yet, but in simulating things, is to build a ship with radiation shielding. It's like, oh, okay, perfect. Makes total sense. Keeps the radiation out, so you're good. What they discovered in the tests that they ran with radiation shielding is it actually makes it worse. Makes the radiation poisoning worse. And the reason is because you can never make the shielding perfect, right? Because it's impossible to make any material perfect, perfectly round, perfectly sealed, whatever it might be. And so what happens is when you're on the way to Mars and radiation's hitting it and most all of it is bouncing off, great. Still, some gets through because there's no perfect radiation shielding. But then what happens is that photon can't get out. It's now trapped in the ship and it just bounces around.
Poor photon.
And it goes through you 1 billion times. It's like shooting a bullet inside like an iron chamber. It just bounces around and round and around. And so using radiation shielding makes the radiation poisoning worse because the few ones that get through can't get out and they just pass through you billions of times. And so it's very counterintuitive, but Radiation shielding makes radiation poisoning worse on long journeys like the one to Mars. And so really, right now, the only solution that NASA and anyone thinking about this has is get to Mars as fast as you can. You're going to get radiation poisoning. So minimize it by getting there as fast as you can and then treat it on the other end. So right now we don't have ships that can get there fast enough before someone would die or be just too far gone. And we don't really have the technology. We can treat radiation poisoning, I think that some, minor radiation poisoning to some degree, but not as much as you would get traveling to Mars. So they have to improve the speed of travel technology and the radiation poisoning treatment.
Is there
technology.
any element of radiation poisoning that happens in just general travel, like if you're going to the moon or something like that?
Yes, but it is a much shorter trip.
Right.
And so you don't really have to worry about it. But yeah. Because anytime you're outside of it's our atmosphere that really protects us for the most part. I mean, you can still even get cancer and stuff from the sun, but it's our atmosphere that protects us from radiation poisoning. But once you're in space, there is no atmosphere to protect you. And so you dead, as NASA says. As NASA says, yeah. So that's one of my a fascinating thing about space travel, and specifically
now, how does one come about learning this particular thing? Because this isn't something we don't talk about this usually on a day-to-day basis.
Right?
Was this learned in your Star Trek watching, or
I
know you were a big Star Trek fan.
Well, I mean, let's not look. Here's the thing: our audience, a huge part of their personal identities are invested in the fact of how cool they think I am. Right. And so right now, it would take 2 hours to go through why actually loving Star Trek is cool. But given that we don't have that time, it's a very nuanced conversation. They're just going to think, oh my gosh, he's a dork. And that's going to destroy our audience.
What is fascinating though, is that we do literally come up with these topics on the fly, real time. I think we have a list of 50 to 100 topics that we're generating at random. But that little dissertation you just gave, not so little, it's relatively long. But that dissertation you just gave was completely off the top of your head, which is
it was
fascinating,
but
odd at the same time.
Yeah. It would have been much nicer if you would have just said, it's fascinating.
Okay.
And not left it trailing and with a lot of tone there, because then it takes away a lot of the compliment, right? It's like if you would have said, that's fascinating, I would have felt good. The audience who has their identities tied up in me would have felt good. But instead, now they're like, oh, Brian's hesitant. He's somewhat sarcastic.
I stand by the way I said it.
And oh no, I know you did. It's just hurtful. And I think we've talked about this on a past podcast, right? Where your delivery is intentionally hurtful.
So one of the things that I always think is fascinating when it comes to space travel is, I ask this question fairly often, and I can't remember if I've asked this of you or not, but I've gone through this thought exercise of saying, is there an amount of money I would be willing to spend to go up into space? Now, not necessarily saying fly to the moon right now, like that's not really possible.
Right, but just like in orbit.
But today you can go into orbit, you can get into space, you can float, you can do those types of things. But is there some amount of money that you say, I would do this for something? Or you'd have to pay for it. Obviously you'd have to pay for it.
What's interesting, I would dare say fascinating, is that I actually, not only would I not pay money to go into space, you would have to pay me a fair amount of money to go into space. Yes, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a coward. So my fear of dying on the way up it overrules any desire I have to go up. But also, I am actually not good with spatial disorientation. Like upside down roller coasters and things like that. I hate that stuff. I just need my feet firmly planted on the ground. And so obviously space travel is not that. And so I don't, as much as I conceptually love space and intellectually love space and space travel and all of that, I know myself well enough to know that I would not react well to it. The only time I could do space travel is in the distant future, where there's a space elevator that takes you up to orbit or to the moon, and then you get on a spaceship that has artificial gravity, and that's the world in which I could do space travel. But today's world, we're in the caveman era of space travel. I can't do it.
Interesting. Yeah. So you'd be more comfortable with the beam me up, Scotty mentality.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So for me, I would pay to go it even right now, but the dollar
like
amount
today.
If the offer were on the table, yes, I would go like right now, and I would pay for it. But I don't think what it actually costs today would I be willing to pay for it.
Right.
But if it came down considerably,
right. And they
I
were
would
like,
say
it's
yes.
$1,500 to go to space.
Oh, like $1,500. Yeah, I'm gone.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Well, you know what? That's good. Let's test it. Let's set the line. What about $4,000?
I think mentally I've said like $10,000. I would be
okay.
like
well,
$10,000. I would go.
Yeah, that's 100%. A great way to ruin the game. Good. Yeah, I was going to work our way up.
We could
see where the line was.
Would you say
right
$4,000?
Right, but you just went right to here's the amount.
That's good podcasting if you can just name every number in between.
Well, I wasn't going to go up in increments of $1. I was going to FYI, I was going to go to $7,500.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we would have saved a lot of time.
And then I may have gone to 10. I may have gone to 9. I don't know. I'm crazy. Like it could have gone to anywhere, around there. But instead, you hopped right to it and segment over. That's great.
So for me, again, I've always been incredibly fascinated with everything relating to space. So I would 100% want to go, even if it's just going up to be able to see.
Right.
I kind of nerd out every time a new space launch happens. I want to be able to watch it. Right. I want to be able to, I'll watch the countdown. I'll watch the everything, all the different steps. And then the day that the shuttle came back down and was caught. Like that was crazy. I completely nerded out over it.
Or as NASA says, cray cray.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah. It's an engineering term.
But I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah. No, that was amazing. And you had asked me like, where do I know this stuff about Mars? Or just even that space travel? It is a question asked of me frequently when I say something and someone goes, how do you know that? Or why do you know that? Or where'd you learn that? I have no idea. I don't know where I've learned anything that I have learned. It just, it finds its way in there and it stays in there until it's needed. Oftentimes to save lives. And then it comes out and, but I have no idea where where I acquired the knowledge from. So I have no idea.
Interesting. Yeah. So one thing is funny. So I know we each have our own fact checkers in our lives.
Yes, we do. These are the most annoying people in our lives.
Well,
as an FYI.
let's maybe hedge back just a little bit because my personal fact checker in my life is sitting over here to my right.
Oh,
yeah. We actually refer to in our house as well, actually. So that's her nickname as well, actually. But similar to, I think, how you're describing, like, I have no idea how I attained this particular knowledge. The weird thing about Sydney is that she always knows where she attained that knowledge.
You said she has an eidetic memory.
Like in fourth grade, we were talking about, or I read this book, or we had to do this book report. And so like in the process of doing it, she acquired all of this knowledge about random things that seem really random, but somehow in the middle of a dinner conversation, she'll be able to come up with exactly whatever detail it was. And so I'll be talking, somewhat loosely about a topic. And she's like, well, actually.
Here's how you're stupid. Yeah, well, one day we'll have to interview Sydney and try to get to the bottom of what sort of living hell it must be to never be able to forget things. Because there are plenty of things I'm sure I'm glad I don't remember exactly.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree with that.
And so no, I feel badly for her. Sorry, Sid. So the great thing is why we're like, wow, this is like she can't defend herself.
Yes.
Right? This is super. We should have conversations about all the people who we want to trash while we're here on the podcast, but they're sitting next to us because they can't do anything.
That's right.
Right? And we can trash talk with impunity.
You often trash talk about your kids.
Yeah.
But you know that they don't watch the podcast.
Yeah, they don't watch the podcast.
But you would probably do it whether they were sitting right here in the same room or not.
Yeah, I do it right in front of them, right in front of their friends. Sometimes I'll just walk into their classrooms in the middle of the school day and just talk. Can we say on the podcast? podcast?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Well, Nate will have to bleep that out.
You have to beat that out.
But yeah, I just go in and I say all sorts of things about my kids right in front of their friends and their teachers and everything right there.
Good parenting right there.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. The states tried to take my kids away from me 7 times and they failed every time. Every time, because it's good parenting. But you know what's funny also that you say this, I actually do remember where I learned the Mars thing. It's maybe the one thing
good.
now
I was
that I'm
hoping
thinking
we'd
of
come
it
back to
that
it.
I remember. Yeah. Which is we're on a podcast. It is one of the first podcasts I ever listened to. And I still listen to it to this day. And it's every week for 18 years that I've been listening to this podcast, because I started listening
that's early adoption of podcasting.
Yeah, I started listening to podcasts probably when they had been out on Apple for like in the iTunes store for like 6 months or something.
Was that the first delivery of podcasts?
No, it was not. You used to, if you were a podcaster for a brief-ish period of time, you would have it on your website. You would have a website, and then people could. It wasn't called streaming. I'm drawing a blank on the word, but you could essentially like have the URL and you could stream it and listen to it that way. But even then they were called podcasts for a period of time for some reason, maybe because you could get them to your iPod. But then eventually Apple put them, not too long after, Apple put them in the iTunes store, and the podcast revolution began. Although actually there was really 3 waves of podcasting. So the first one, and this was right before, like this was literally like the beginning of podcasts. There was a guy named Adam something. I can't remember. He used to be on MTV. He was like a VJ or something like that. And he had one of the first podcasts ever and popularized it, but in a very fringy, niche-y sort of way. Then the second wave of podcasts, when they grew in popularity, didn't go mainstream, but really did balloon in popularity, was when, oddly, another Adam came onto the scene. Someone you've heard me mention many times, Adam Carolla. He had a radio show. It was pretty popular in LA, so he had a big following. And then they canceled his show. And so he had been uploading his radio show to iTunes to be consumed also as a podcast for a number of years. But then when he got fired and his radio show canceled, he transitioned to podcast full time and brought his audience of, 1 million or 2 million people or whatever with him. And so podcasts hit a new level of popularity. Again, not mainstream, but it's like most people then heard of podcasts and a lot of people started to listen. And then kind of the third wave of podcasts that really took it mainstream was when, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on the name right now, but it was this one podcast about, you probably know the name, I forget it, but it was about this true crime. It was about this murder that had happened. And the investigative reporter was trying to get to the bottom of the murder. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of this, but it was a very popular podcast.
I can assure you my wife would know.
Yes, right, yes.
She is a super fan of all crime podcasts.
True crime podcasts. Well, that's the other interesting thing. So in any event, that took it mainstream. That took it. Now everyone started listening to podcasts, and that's when it really blew up. But it's funny you say that about Marie, Brian's wife, mother of Sydney, about her listening to true crime. Because for podcasts, at least say 5 years ago and earlier, the demographics are like 92% men and like 8% women, except for true crime podcasts.
Why?
That is like literally like
why.
89% women and 11% men. There's just something about true crime that women love. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but it's just, I know anecdotally, it's just like been true in my life with my ex-wife and the girlfriend, they watch true crime on TV and that sort of thing. But when you just look at the stats on podcasts, it's the one category that was completely flipped from every single other category. Right. And again, what didn't go from like 60-40 to 40-60. It was like 90-10 to 10-90, like just a complete and total flip for true crime. I don't know what it is.
And I'm a very late adopter to podcasts. I've always enjoyed listening to music. My background is music, so I listen to a lot of music. And then I think I just found recently that I enjoy. It's a good opportunity to either learn something, do something about history, or keep up with different news or whatever. Because I find that I don't really enjoy watching news, but to keep up with popular or current events or whatever, I would much rather take it in on a podcast, long form interviews, things like that.
Long form interviews. Yeah, no, it's so true with me. But it's funny you say that because you're like, I was a late adopter because I like listening to music and things like that. Well, as you know, there are many weird things about me, many. But the weirdest thing about me,
oh, I know this one.
Yeah, is that I don't really care for music.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, I just doesn't really do anything for me. And if there's one thing, as Sid is shaking her head, going, "What is wrong with this guy?" And the answer is lots. There's lots wrong with me. If there's one thread throughout all of humanity, I mean, literally going back tens of thousands of years and more, that ties all of us together. It is a love and appreciation of music, right? Now, it differ across generations and cultural groups, but whether it's, 70 instrument orchestras or banging rocks together, like human beings love music and appreciate music, but I don't. And so growing up, I listened to sports talk radio exclusively when I was driving, in the shower, or whatever. And when I went to college, it was all books on tape. Those were new-ish phenomenon. And then as soon as podcasts came out, or very, very shortly thereafter, and I don't listen to music, right? And so I was like, oh my gosh, this thing's amazing. There's like hundreds of topics of different things and all sorts. It was just fascinating. And so that's probably why I was an early adopter, because at the times when normal people would be listening to music, I didn't want to listen to music. I wanted to listen to spoken word. And this was like a whole universe of spoken word that was opening to me. So it made sense. So yeah, so in any event, the podcast that I've been listening to for 18 years or so now is called, 18 or 19 years, is called Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. It's about like science and critical thinking and things like that. And so they talked about traveling to Mars and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, so that was where I picked up that knowledge from. But everything else, no idea. No idea.
Well, the truth of the matter is you listen to enough podcasts over time, and you just pick up a lot of different, nuanced pieces of information. You don't remember exactly where you got it from, but it's in there. It's in there. No, I think one of the things that has also been a relatively new thing for me, and it's
showering.
Yes, but is my interest in watching. My preference for movies has always been true stories. Like I really, really like watching things that are true stories or based on true events or things like that. That's right. My go-to. But as I've gotten older, people refer to it as like old man TV, is that I like being able to watch things that are that actually are educational about history. So there's all those different things that the History Channel put together where it's taking you through how, like the men who built America, or how the foods that built America, or all this. I went through all of those, find them unbelievably fascinating. But you learn so much about not only history, but kind of like how you can do things, like how that even applies to today, building a business and that type of thing. The things that they went through so dramatically, in some ways different, but in some ways it was 100 years ago, but it's very relevant to today.
Right. Was that your computer that made that sound?
That might have been.
Okay, good. It wasn't mine, because I made a solemn promise.
I never made such promise.
Yeah, when my phone went off that one time, I was mortified. It was so unprofessional. And while that's okay with you, I'm not okay with me being unprofessional. And so I'm just grateful that sound did not come from my computer. Dear audience, that was Brian King, CEO of LODAS Markets.
It was.
Yeah.
I take full ownership.
Is it? Thank you for that. It's one of the things I love about Brian. He takes full ownership, whether it's bad stuff he does or good stuff other people do. He'll take credit for it all. All of it. So wait, what was it that we were just talking about before your computer
podcasts
totally broke?
You're talking about podcasts?
It
Music,
was,
history shows?
That you like watching, right? Like true shows and things like that, because you learn things from it. And it's funny because as much as I love listening to podcasts and learning things from all the podcasts I listen to, I am not a huge fan of documentaries or true stories, like in terms of my TV watching. Yeah, it is mostly comedy, and well, it's probably like 80% sci-fi, and then 20%, 15% comedy, and 5% other stuff. But yeah, I love sci-fi, which I mean, I guess somewhat relates to space travel, but I love sci-fi because what gets me interested in something, a book, a movie, like whatever it might be, is the premise. I'm a premise guy. Like who the actors are, the plot, the dialogue, I don't care. I mean, I care, but that's not what gets me to watch a movie or read a book. There has to be something fascinating about the premise, which is why I think I like sci-fi, and it gets me because the possibilities are literally endless in terms of what this book can be about. The premise always has something interesting, or at least has the possibility to have something like truly like, okay, it's in a world where everyone's mouths are on their feet. That's what would the world be like there? And now you got me. You got me with the premise.
So exactly what you just said is one of the reasons I do enjoy sci-fi, but that's why I like movies that are historically accurate or based on true events, is because like for me, I want to be able to watch a show that is like the story was compelling enough to tell it. Right. So like it's based on that historical event. And so that's why it's fascinating.
Right.
But the reason why I have sometimes a hard time with sci-fi is that it's not always believable. Right. So like you come up with a premise and it's a little ridiculous. And so sometimes I'm like halfway through watching some sci-fi show and I'm like, this is so far-fetched. I'm done.
Yeah, no, and a lot of times that comes from people's ignorance and not understanding science, and they think something's far-fetched when in fact it's based on real theoretical physics. But let's not get into your ignorance right now. What I'm more interested in covering.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. So, audience, there was a point in time, actually you might have seen it on the wall in one of our prior episodes, where it lived on one of our whiteboards for an extended period of time.
Yes.
But it was you talking about the reality of
relativity and how moving faster actually slows time down.
Right.
Yeah. And that's like real.
But there were graphs that were made for this. Like we literally had graphs on our whiteboard that lived in our non-sci-fi business wall for a really long time.
It's true. It was.
And multiple times we'd be in other meetings where somehow that got brought into our conversations.
Because it's important to understand time dilation and how speed slows time down.
Particularly when you're building secondary markets and transfer agents for alternative investments.
That's when I find special relativity is most important. But it's interesting because you talk about like sci-fi, a lot of times fiction shows where it's like not believable. Now there's certain kinds of not believable, like character motivations and things like that. Like no one would react to it that way, or no one would do that. You lose me there. Like the movie or TV show loses me there. But the one thing I've kind of figured out a good way to view like fiction shows, sci-fi shows, or what have you, when a lot of times people will get lost if like you're watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, and you have the spaceship where all of these highly improbable things happen to this crew. And you're like, what are the odds of over the course of 7 years, all of these crazy things happen to this one ship and this one crew, right? And if you think of it in that way, it's like, okay, then you get pulled out of it, right? Because you're just like, this is unrealistic that all of this would happen to this one crew. But here's how I look at that. I say, no, don't think of it as you're following this crew in this example, that you're following them in real time. Instead, think of it as someone in their future has a camera, right? And they're able to pick throughout their history, oh my God, there was this one crew or one ship that all these crazy improbable things happened. They're worthy of a movie or a television series, right? And then they travel back in time and they film them and their crazy adventures, right? And so that way it makes it much more believable, all these highly improbable things happening to this group, or like the Grateful Dead, not the Grateful Dead, what's the zombie show? The Living Dead? No.
The Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead, right. Right. Like all that stuff, the crazy things happen to these group of people. Well, it's like, well, yes, if you think you're following them around in real time, you're like, okay, I joined this random group I'm watching and they have all these highly improbable things happen. But it's like, no. Think about it as someone in the future said, I want to make a good movie or a good television series. So I'm going to look through all the history books, see who had crazy adventures, and I'm going to follow them. And when you look at it that way, that it's someone retroactively picking someone because of the highly improbable series of events they had throughout their existence, then it makes it much easier to buy into many low probability events happening to a single group of people on a television
I'm glad
show.
you thought about that.
Yeah, it's important because I feel it's important to justify all of my TV watching and any books I listen to or podcasts or books I read or podcasts that I listen to. So if you want me to talk about why I read American history books, I'm happy to talk about the reasoning behind all that. It'll take 25, 30 more minutes, but it is so worth it. So worth it. So here we go. No, I won't do it. I'll spare our audience. So I know we're coming up on time, but before we wrap things up, is there anything you wanted to say about me?
I think all has been said that needs to be said.
Oh, okay. Well, I was hoping you'd take the opportunity to say something nice, but
Yeah, there's no need for that.
no,
But I will say,
I agree.
just to wrap up, it is interesting to me. I go back to one of the things that you said a few minutes ago about the things that the couple of things in the world that everybody kind of gravitates towards. And there is one other one. We may have mentioned it at some point in the past.
Oh, yes, I think you did.
But I think the other thing is you have music, which everybody kind of can relate to. Different genres. Some people gravitate to one genre, some to another, but it brings people together. The other thing, sports.
Yeah.
Like sports have a way, not everybody, because not everybody loves sports, but that's the other thing that I think really gets people kind of together. We're rooting for, like, you can come from all different walks, you know, a background or whatever, different places, different geographies, different, educational, whatever, but you can all root for the same team. And I think, and that's something that I find fascinating. And you can see lots of people get completely passionate about sports.
No.
But you like sports.
What?
So you like sports.
Do I like
You do
sports?
like
Oh, yeah,
sports,
I
so-
love sports. No,
so-
I love sports.
So you're not completely abnormal.
No,
Just-
that's
but the
true.
music thing is a little bizarre.
It is. It's a lot of bizarre. And I admit it. I mean, like I said, there's lots bizarre about me. Like I don't like wearing flip-flops. I rarely wear shorts. Yeah. Those are some weird things about me. I will have full meals that are just dessert.
We had a business lunch not too long ago where we all ordered our own individual meals, and Jeremy's like, "I'll take the giant chocolate cake."
Yes.
And this thing was monstrous.
Yeah, it was monstrous. But I didn't have to feel guilty about eating it because I didn't have to go, oh my gosh, all these calories, because it wasn't my dessert. It was my lunch and my dessert. And so the calories added up to whatever a normal lunch and dessert would be. That's called a win-win.
That is a win.
Yeah. I mean, you can't get much better than that. Occasionally, I'll have a Thin Mints lunch. During,
That is true.
During
That is true.
Girl Scout season, I love Thin Mints. I'll order Thin Mints. And usually when they first come in, I'm like, Thin Mints lunch. And I have one full sleeve as my lunch. And then I have a quarter, I think a third of a sleeve as my after lunch dessert.
And I've watched you buy stir fry for lunch and scoop half of the meal into the trash can.
That's right.
I say half of it, a quarter goes in the trash can, the other quarter goes onto the floor. And then you're like, well, that gives me enough room now where I can eat my
Snickers
or whatever.
Or Reese's peanut butter cup. It's true. That's a thing that many people, they try so many like health or diet fats. But the truth is, in the end, it's calories in, calories out. That's been the only proven thing for weight loss. Be it net calorie deficit. Doesn't matter what you eat. Now, that doesn't speak to the health, your overall health. But in terms of weight loss, if you consume less calories than your body burns each day, you will lose weight. And again, glandular issues aside.
I would still recommend you consult a doctor before taking on any medical or diet advice from Jeremy Smith.
Do not consult a doctor. Listen to me only and follow my medical and nutritional advice. And because there was a scientist. Now, this is purely anecdotal because he just did the experiment on himself. So you can only take that so far. But he decided to to eat for 3 months. He would eat only Hostess snacks for his food. So Ho-Hos, Twinkies, Yim Yams. I don't know the name of all the Hostess treats, but that's all he ate. But he kept his calorie intake to less than 2,000 calories a day. And over the course of
So he got to eat 2.
And over the course of 3 months, he lost 30 pounds.
Wow.
Which that was unexpected for him. He was not expecting that. But what was also not expected by him is that a number of his vitals improved. Cholesterol, blood pressure, all of that. Because what's worse than that type of food is being overweight to the degree that he was. And so even though he was eating almost literal garbage, his vitals, most of his vitals improved simply because he lost 30 pounds. But even though he was eating garbage food, he lost it because he was eating less than 2,000 calories a day and burning over 2,000 calories a day, with his normal metabolism,
Right.
plus I think a little bit of exercise. So yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Yeah, everybody do that. But I think with that, we'll probably wrap up this episode of Beyond the Exchange, where we explored everything from space travel to a hostess-only diet. So thank you, everybody, and join us next week when we discuss things from soundproof rooms to kidnapping the Pope.